The following will contain spoilers for Steven Universe Future. Thank you. Oh, Steven, you've been through so much, dear boy. We're gonna miss you. Artemis, I guess it's time. Hello, folks, this is Dragon Videos, and a lot had happened during March 27th. For one thing, we've had the last couple of episodes of Steven Universe Future, and for some of you who read chapter 266 of My Hero Academia, witnessed the longest tragedy ever. But putting that aside, we are going over the top 10 list, and I'm going to focus on the Steven Universe Future episodes, and it's going to have to be a very special one at that. So I'm going to go over the list of the top 10 best Steven Universe Future episodes that have been aired on Cartoon Network. Please be warned, there will be spoilers, and I'm going to evaluate them on the development of the characters and the plotting of the storyline. No, for any of you who are wondering, I am not referring to an actual Bluebird. I am talking about the return of two Pistols. Aquamarine, who was hated by all, and then of course we have Eyeball Ruby, one of the strangest couples you would see in the cartoon universe. So in this Steven Universe episode, in the number 10 list, Steven provides a commercial for homeschool explaining of what happens. And when he wraps up and heads home, he finds the strange pranks happening to him left and right. These pranks were caused by Bluebird Azurite, a somewhat very charming character who seems to be a fusion of Eyeball and Aquamarine, which is pretty dang obvious, even though they thought it was a clever disguise. Steven was basically suspicious about the whole thing. I mean, who could blame him? These are two of the gems that were the worst of the worst. But the gems kept him in mind that he had let all the homeworld gems change their minds and be open about it. It worked for a while, until Greg was held hostage by these two, and Steven had thrown down. And which is why I put this in number 10, because we had a moment where Bluebird Azurite was having a fight with Steven we've wanted for so long, as well as having a fight between Bluebird and Alexandrite. Now, again, I put this in number 10 because it's been a while since we've heard anything from Aquamarine and Eyeball Ruby. They haven't been seen since Season 3 and Season 4 and Season 5. But bear in mind, one of the things that I like about this episode is also because it gives off that message that not everyone's going to be redeemable, or that they would have to be changed in other ways, because Aquamarine was a little bit more open to fusion than she was in the beginning of Season 5. And I'd also like to make a small highlight to Greg Universe. He definitely became a temporary damsel in distress to the whole thing, but over time he started to become a little bit more of a badass when he cut his hair in order to prevent Steven from losing Little Homeschool. I'm pretty sure the majority of you are aware that I was planning to put this on the list, and I know it's number 9, but I thought to put it in there because of the qualities of the story. So Steven tries to do some feng shuiing of getting rid of his mother's portrait and trying to find a place for it, but then he gets contacted by the Zoomins from the human zoo and is invited on board. He and Amethyst encountered the Famethist, and of course everybody's favorite little annoying gem, Holly Blue Agate. So for a while it was a happy celebration until Steven meets the Rose Quartz gems. So yeah, basically it was a boatload boatload of awkward on the ship, and then it turned into a boatload of awkward back home, especially for Pearl and Garnet, because it reminded them a lot of Rose. It wasn't until towards bedtime that Steven had a slumber party with 3 gems, and they are just fun to watch at that point. And Steven still felt awkward, and over time, the shy Rose Quartz said that maybe Steven didn't want them around. Steven admitted to that because it just felt strange. Even though they were similar to his mother's previous form, it didn't mean that they were his mom per se. They were more like siblings. And I put this in number 9 because this is Steven coming over with the terms of his mother's past, as well as basically being introduced to Rose Quartzes in the process. But don't worry, the episodes get darker from there. Now, this episode definitely had a lot of trippy stuff going on, that was for sure. And number 8 featured our favorite green space Dorito returning again, Peridot. So they watched the show, but they didn't like what was going on. And Steven, of course, been having wild dreams in the beginning episode, but things get a wild turn. So, yeah, you think Chili Deed was weird? Basically, there was the one with the diamonds, which I'm so glad that the diamonds did not see. And with each strange dream after another, Steven began to get tired, but he kept doing it so he could stay close to Peridot. And then, of course, Peridot takes on a more terrifying turn, and Steven has his emotional breakdown, admitting to the fact that he can't keep having problems to hang out with her. Peridot assures him that they could still be friends and they don't have to have problems in order to hang out together, which definitely shows a huge highlight in Peridot's character as well as their friendship. So the two still hate the show, but they found ways of being together as friends, which is why I put this in number 8, because it shows of how much Peridot has grown as a character and willing to be a good friend. So number 7, which is volleyball, focuses on Steven's mother, Pink Diamond's background. So it begins with Steven fixing up some gems after some mistakes they've made, and then Pink Pearl, who is soon nicknamed Volleyball, explains that Pink Diamond gave her that injury, which sets off Steven like the 4th of July. And Pink Pearl seems to have the same kind of relationship Pearl had with Pink during the time of a rebellion. This resulted in 3 of them having to go over to the reef, which is basically where all the pearls are made and become satisfying to the respective owner. Steven was very focused on his goal of fixing volleyball and moving forward with his life. Well, that didn't work well, as it turns out that volleyball's injury wasn't physical, it was mental. The emotional trauma that Pink had inflicted on her was great. Steven got really upset up to the point where after Pearl and Pink Pearl argued, it was the worst and triggered the whole facility to try to reform them, which resulted in a brand new fusion, Mega Pearl, and they immediately began fighting off and turning the reef off before anything else happened. I put this episode in number 7 because not only do we learn more about Pink Pearl, but we also learn a little bit more about Pink Diamond as who she was in the past and how much she has grown in the character. It also shows that even though that Pink Pearl and Pearl may never see eye to eye in everything, at least they're finding some way to move forward with their lives. Of course, I couldn't complete this list without a little homeschool. This is basically the biggest opener of the series. So it starts off with Steven helping Cherry Quartz become a little bit more accustomed, and along the way we also learn what has been going on during the past couple of years since the season 5 episodes. So Steven is basically helping out with Little Homeschool on corrupting gems, as well as Pearl, Garnet, and Amethyst being teachers to the school and helping Homeworld gems become more accustomed to life on Earth. Well, almost everyone was eager to be part of it. Jasper was very unhappy to get involved and seemed to keep herself away. Steven seemed more than willing to try to help her. He practically found her hideout and once again tried to convince her, but the only way to do so was through fighting. So by then, Steven was in a major throwdown of his life, and it was by then we also got a look at his powers. I put this in number 6 on this list because this is definitely a great start to the series, as well as showing what is to come, Steven's exploration of his mental health, and that everything is far from over. It definitely shows that we still had a few questions, like how is Steven handling his mom's issues and all of that stuff, which is why I put it at number 6. Why So Blue really was one of the best Lapis Lazuli episodes, and I can't thank Crewniverse enough for trying to put in the effort of this writing. So, you see, it starts off with Steven and Lapis Lazuli exploring a planet that was supposedly being terraformed by 2 Lapis Lazulis who have yet to reform. And I mean, in the mental sense, not in the physical sense. Anyway, when they find them, the duo finds that they got their job cut out for them because, oh boy, these 2 are a destructive pair of stubborn mules. So they tried their best to do Steven's diplomatic approach. Steven tries to show them art, which is very colorful and realistic, and shows of how much Lapis had really come to love art in general, and of course music. Nice Lapis, as some people like to say, was really digging that concept pretty darn well. While Mean Lapis was basically what many people have been saying, Regina George, and it was not pretty. So we resulted in having our song Why So Blue. I find it to be a very strong contrast to the song On Your Shore, and if you put them together, they really do go hand in hand. Lapis reflects of how far she had come as a character, going as far back as the time where she had been through an abusive relationship with Jasper, resulting into their ugly fusion, Malachite, and of course being tossed into a mirror for thousands of years and lashing out at people who have trapped her there. It really shows that Lapis really had grown as a person in overcoming those fears. However, the 2 Lapises didn't appreciate that and just simply mocked her at that point. By then, our Crystal Gem Lapis had enough. She tried the diplomatic way, she tried to play nice, but it was at that point where she finally blew a gasket, and she had every right to do so. And before long, she found herself saying, "Who's pathetic now?" and was about to deal with the ultimate blow. But when she noticed that Steven didn't like her behavior, she immediately stopped and pulled back on her power. It was the only thing that got the Lapises to stop being mean to them and listen to what they say. But Lapis didn't like it and felt like what she did was considered weakness and restraint is strength, and in a lot of ways that's true, even in terms of bullying. So Steven and Lapis get back home, and Steven tries to reassure Lapis it wasn't her fault that they were being stubborn, and Lapis kept seeing some of herself in them, and it definitely shows of how much she had grown as a character, which is why I put it in number 5, because even though their thing wasn't a total success, at least they got through one of the Lapises and giving off a more fleshing out of Lapis's character arc and tying it with a little bow. Okay, we got ourselves a 2 for here, ladies and gentlemen, and I do it because it's hand in hand. Together Forever is one of them. So Steven goes to Garnet for some advice, but at the worst of times, because Ruby and Sapphire are going to do their own thing. So, Steven talks to Ruby about his rough time trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life, and then he feels his connection with Connie. So, Ruby, being a useless lesbian at times, she explains to propose, and when Steven goes to Sapphire, she says the same thing. And we all know how much of a bad idea that is, considering the fact that Steven is still a teenager and is far ready from going into a marriage commitment. But like any other young couple who is hopeful, Steven decides to set up everything and does one of the romantic proposals anyone would ever do. But Connie assured him that it's not the right time to do so. So you could sort of say the proposal bombed big time for him, resulting in a major heartbreak. Before long, Garnet shows up and explains that even though Steven has to fill some sort of void in his life, Connie can't be part of that void. He's just his soulmate, someone to complement him. Really, Garnet, you could have picked the worst time to give that advice. So finally, we also have Growing Pains. This episode is also put at number 4 because it definitely represents a turning point in Steven's character, as well as the turning point of where things get really, really dark from there in more ways than one. So we go over Steven overcoming his sadness by burying himself in ice cream, upset that he's not getting married. But let's face it, marriage is a huge commitment and not everyone follows it. Anyway, Steven goes to the doctor when Connie finds him pink and swelling a lot more than he normally is. They run some tests and they find that his skeleton is eerily similar to that of Volleyball's. It was by then that Steven began to list some of his emotional trauma that he's been through. Basically, every single mishap he's witnessed in the entire episode. It's by then that Connie's mom, who was a major star, explained that trauma is basically a very horrible thing to go through. It's by then that Steven has a major meltdown after having to explain to his father that Steven had tried to propose to Connie and it blew up in his face, and that he can't seem to move on from that emotional trauma. Again, I put these 2 episodes in number 4 because this is Steven's turning point and where we get to learn more about the psychological issues that weren't previously addressed in the original Steven Universe series. This is also where some of us have been pointing out right from the get-go of how much that Steven just needs therapy at that point, because he can't move forward from that trauma on his own. He needs someone to talk to about it. So we pick off from Fragments, where we were all in a huge ringer after the tail end. So Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl were as shocked as we are to find Jasper in Steven's house and referring to Steven as my diamond. Steven, shaken by all that has happened, decided that he should cut away from the Crystal Gem family and visit the family that he has been avoiding the entire time, the Diamonds. Jasper insisted on coming, but Steven decided to make her do her own life, and it was a huge shocker for Jasper. But Steven decided to head over to Homeworld, which I'm glad he did, and we got to see that it really had improved since Season 5. And plus we got to see Spinel again. She has improved a little since we've seen her from the movie. She's not as clingy, and it wasn't like super stringy teardrops, but she still has some of the abandonment issues clinging on to her. And then we have the introduction of Yellow's progress. Yellow came off as very stern and no-nonsense, while here in Steven Universe Future, she was willing to help out the gems that were shattered and restore their physical forms, which would also include the cluster. And then we have Blue Diamond, who always came off as a very depressed ruler who would want nothing more than to make everyone miserable around her. Instead, she now does clouds, which helps with their emotional problems. And it definitely helps them give a sense of happiness, even if it's temporary. And plus, that song is so cute. My Little Reason Why. It just represents the growth that Blue Diamond had since her debut. She definitely comes off as a more hopeful and optimistic ruler who is still willing to love others, such as Spinel, and willing to share those feelings. And for some of you who have been doing drug references, it doesn't strike me as that. It's more of an aromatherapy, if you will. And even when that didn't work for Steven, they decide to go see White Diamond. Many of you have remembered from Legs from Here to Homeworld, White came off as very alienistic and dismissive the majority of the time. Now, she just basically lets others in. Now, surely nothing could come wrong with that ability. Oh, yeah, that one bit was pretty dark. I know this is gonna sound horrible, but I appreciate the irony in this because Steven was nearly mind-controlled and had his gem ripped out and was terrified, so White deserved that in some ways. But it didn't justify too much. Embarrassed, Steven ran away from the diamond, feeling like he was no longer able to control what he was feeling. It was by then that I began to appreciate this episode and put it number 3 because we get to see of how far Homeworld has come in terms of character development. We got to see of how far the Diamonds have come in terms of personality and show that they really have put their foot forward and moving on from their old ways. And it's basically huge that they gave up their leadership and find some ways that their powers can be put into a positive spin. Goodbyes are the hardest thing to do, especially for a beloved TV series such as this. So, in future, Steven gets ready to leave Beach City. But he can't announce that just yet. He had to get that news through the crystal gems, and he decided with Cookie Cat, his own handmade Cookie Cats. And there he decides to explain that in some ways Pink Diamond, his mom, had to grow as a person. And we're immediately sent back to the nostalgia of a first episode where Steven thought Cookie Cats could help him activate his gem powers. And of course the crystal gems wrap, and it was just heartbreaking to see it all end. And of course, can we appreciate the fact that Steven finally got a therapist out of the deal? When the gems weren't as sad as he originally expected, he decided to give them all gifts. So B-Team took it pretty hard, including Jasper, and he gave Bismuth the flag, Peridot his shirt, and then we had Lapis Lazuli her own art kit. And then Steven presented his ukulele for Pearl, the wedding planner for Garnet, and his video games to Amethyst. And for a while, they were, of course, still as passive as ever. And bless Steven's heart that he gave Greg his own house. His own house, people. And it turns out that the gems were just being brave for him, putting on a mask and watching him go, and all because they just didn't want to hold him back. It was by then when Steven confronted them, they finally blew out crying. Like, they finally let Steven know that they were sad about the goodbye. And that's why I put this in number 2, because this was a well-written way to say goodbye to everything that the Crystal Gems and Steven have been through, the relationship they had over the years, and how far they've come through the trauma that was created by the diamonds and rose quartz. It's also a good way, as for the fans, to have some way of saying goodbye to Crewniverse after all the years of being so faithful to the show and to the people who made this possible, which is why I put this at number 2. Oh boy, was this a huge emotional episode, and that's why I put it number 1. It was practically a scene when we finally got to a big reveal of Steven's corruption, but not as a worm, but a Godzilla-based monster. And this is basically the form he's taken based on the fact of his horrible consequences he made in life. So the gems try to find a way to handle him without hurting him or Beach City. The crystal gems step in, even the cluster steps in, and everyone tries to find their best way to approach this, but they didn't have exactly a clue. And then, of course, the diamonds step in, which, you have to admit, they have the most interesting timing in the entire galaxy. And when their attempts failed by using their non-destructive powers, it was by then they all felt miserable. The crystal gems were getting upset, the diamonds and Spinel were getting upset, and they all admitted to the fact that they neglected Steven's feelings. And even White, the prima donna of the diamonds, even admitted to her own abuse to all the gems and everyone in the series. And that's pretty huge on the diamonds part, as well as shows a lot of thought into the character arcs. So, Connie was basically the star of the show, getting everyone's act together, getting them to pay attention to the fact that Steven needs them right now. They had to put their act together, focus on Steven, and find a way to make him feel better and assured, because Steven needs them now, and as well as to return that favor that he helped them throughout the series. It was by then that this creates a bigger reason why Connie is such a dynamic half for Steven. She recognizes Steven's emotional problem and addresses it in such a way where everyone finally hugs him and assures him that he's not going to be alone, that no one was going to abandon him. It was by then that when Steven was finally assured of all this, he was uncorrupted and realized some of the consequences in his corrupted form. And Lion shows up to kiss him and comforts him. Everyone just watching him as he cries his eyes out. And for good reason. He's been through so much for the past 5 seasons. He just needs a good cry and a hug at that point. And I'm pretty sure that the Diamonds have been having some talk with Steven, as well as trying to give him some comfort for what had been done. Which is why I put this in the number 1 spot of best Steven Universe Future episode, because it just is all that emotional concept and the strong lesson about how powerful communication can be, as well as Steven's emotional growth of recognizing that he's not alone and that his attempts at kindness were returned, which is a stronger lesson moral about if you're kind to others, then they would be kind to you in return. Well, folks, this is my wrap-up of a Steven Universe Future video. If many of you are interested in what I have been doing, please subscribe and do a like. Also, feel free to do any comments of any episodes that you were favorites in Steven Universe Future. This is Dragon Videos, signing off.